triple murder made headlines when police believed it was a ritualistic set of killing and the appearance of a rarely seen blue moon.
It's witchcraft. I'll say that right now.
This murder was front page news.
They suffered big time.
The way in which each of the victims were killed was very brutal.
Richard was shot, had a wound to his head. John, whoever did it, was able to cut his throat. The mom was killed in the same manner. She was hit in the head as well with a hammer, and her throat was also cut.
Richard worked in the crypto department, and of course when you have those high clearances and you don't show up for work, a lot of people get very concerned.
Whoever did this came over there for a specific reason.
Why so much focus on the cigarette butt in the trash? Because it's bad for them. It is beyond a reasonable doubt bad for them.
I'm gonna find out and I'm gonna put your ass in jail.
If you put something out bad, expect bad. That's how it works.
What's the address of your emergency room? Okay, your wife is in a bar. You said she's unresponsive.
This is what he's going to tell you.
How to get out of that situation.
And I grabbed the gun.
Trying to find the first place to put a body.
No, sir. The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and to find the defendant.
There's 67 counties in Florida. We're the last county in Florida before you cross the state line and you're in the state of Alabama.
We are affectionately known as the Redneck Riviera, and we have the prettiest beaches in the world.
But that's not all Escambia County, Florida is known for.
We unfortunately have witnessed our fair share of odd crimes throughout the years. We've had, the Black Widow murders were here. There was a lady that killed several of her husbands. We had the Billings case where the family was murdered in the home and they had 8 special needs children.
We seem to find our way into the paper probably more than we would like.
And it was here that the infamous serial killer Ted Bundy was captured.
He didn't get away from us. We ended up prosecuting him, and of course he was finally put to death. But he's just one in that long string of people that somehow have a tie to Escambia County. We jokingly say that Escambia County is this, Twilight Zone vortex.
And no case fit that description better than what came to be called the Blue Moon Murders, connected to a rare astrological occurrence with historical overtones of witchcraft.
There are some indications of what the motive is.
This murder was front page news.
The media really latched onto the Blue Moon witchcraft murder.
3 members of one family found dead in their modest home.
Initial research has led us to believe that there's a potential that it was a ritualistic killing.
The way in which each of the victims were killed was very brutal.
The time of death, we believe, on Tuesday also coincides with what's referred to as a blue moon. It's witchcraft. I'll say that right now.
The crime scene itself was a puzzle for investigators.
It was kind of a macabre scene. It was so out of the ordinary.
The house was kind of in disarray. They noticed that there were piles of blankets and clothing. Once they kind of lifted the outer edges of those piles of blankets and clothing, in the den area, they observed, a foot. And they also observed a female hand underneath one of the piles.
The body of an elderly woman, Von Seal Smith, and under the other piles of clothing, her 2 adult sons, Richard and John.
Well, whoever had done this had taken time, obviously, to cover the bodies up.
The investigation was led by then Escambia County homicide detective Matt Infinger.
The position of John sitting on the couch, whoever did it walked right up to him, hit him in the head with a hammer, and then was able to cut his throat. He didn't even try and defend himself. So he was either asleep or knew the individual. The mom was killed in the same manner. She was killed in her chair in the living room where she always stayed and watched TV. She was hit in the head as well with a hammer, and her throat was also cut. Richard was shot, had a wound to his head, and his throat was also cut.
And investigators came to learn from neighbors that there was an aura of mystery about the victims themselves, starting with the mother.
She was a woman who apparently never left the house. She ordered from QVC. She'd get 5 and 6 packages a day from QVC. The home was just stuffed with boxes and dresses and all sorts of things that she bought from QVC.
These people, they stayed to themselves. There were neighbors that didn't have any interaction with them.
The older brother, Richard, worked at the Pensacola Naval Air Station for a secretive Homeland Security division, which added to the mystery surrounding the case.
Richard worked in the crypto department. You know, some of this we really aren't at liberty to talk about, some of the elements of the case, but he worked in the crypto room, which is all the codes that they teach the Navy folks. And of course, when you have those high clearances and you don't show up for work, a lot of people get very concerned.
So certainly one of the things that investigators looked into was whether Richard Smith's job had anything to do with his murder as well as the murder of his family members.
When Richard Smith's body was discovered, his car keys were missing, and there was DNA in one of his front pants pockets that was not identified, which is a pretty strange thing to have happen.
And a full federal investigation was launched to see if some foreign assassin or terrorist was somehow connected to what happened to the family.
There was 2 DHS investigators that worked with me on the case, and we were able to determine that there was nothing that Richard was working on that would lend to this type of thing happening to him.
What the investigators were focused on instead was a man who lived nearby and would later claim to be a follower of a pagan religion called Wicca, people who believe in magic and practice witchcraft, with rituals tied to phases of the moon.
And in his home, he had the altar set up with the dead flowers and the dagger, and he had a pentagram on the floor.
I knew that this wasn't a random homicide because there was no forced entry to the home. So it was like whoever did this came over there for a specific reason, committed these murders, and then tried to conceal it.
And over the next 24 hours, investigators would find themselves fully caught up in what the county sheriff called the Twilight Zone vortex.
The 3 could have been murdered in a witchcraft ritual, based on the timing of the blue moon and the positioning of the victims' bodies.
Well, the way we found out, it was on the news.
The Smith family's out-of-town relatives were horrified as they learned the details of what happened inside this home in Pensacola, Florida.
I try not to think of what they went through that day, because when I do a breakdown.
Faye Haas was a cousin to the 2 dead sons, Richard and John. Von Seal was her aunt, known as Aunt Bonnie.
This is Aunt Bonnie. This is Aunt Bonnie. When I think of what they went through, that's the hard thing. They suffered. They suffered big time.
She had a hard time understanding who would want to kill any of them. John, at the age of 47, had never quite grown up.
That was the hardest, I think, to take because he was so sweet. He was just, and always smiling. He was like a child in a man's body, the special needs.
She says her Aunt Bonnie only became a shut-in after her husband died and her health failed.
My aunt was a good woman, and she was a very good mother. They traveled a lot. I had plenty of pictures of they traveled and a lot. They were very outgoing before, so they were very active until the illness.
and the eldest son, Richard, took care of both his mother and brother.
A lot of people say, why was he 49 and living at home? Because he was taking care of his mother, and he knew he was going to have to take care of John all his life.
The biggest question on Fay Haas's mind was why Aunt Bonnie's third son, Donald Wayne Hartung, who also lived in Pensacola, had not called.
And I said, Wayne hasn't called us. Why hasn't he called us or tried to get in touch with any of us over here?
That was because Donald Wayne Hartung was at the police station.
Let me start by getting your name and information. What's your first name?
Donald.
What's your middle name, Donald?
Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E. Hartung, H-A-R-T-U-N-G.
The first interview I did with Donald, I was trying to just get a overall picture of the family and what was going on, the family dynamics.
Donald Hartung was 59 years old and worked as a security guard at a local hospital. He told Detective Matt Infinger he had a good relationship with his mother and with stepbrothers John and Richard Smith.
Do you have good relationships with them, or?
Yeah, we have great relationships.
Hartung said he had last been at the house 3 days earlier when he went there to cook dinner, as he does every Tuesday. He had not yet been told how his family died.
Your folks, your family over there was killed?
Killed? They said they were deceased, and they never told me how they were killed.
They're dead, and it looks like they were killed.
Killed?
Mm-hmm.
How were they killed?
It looked like they were shot.
Shot?
Mm-hmm.
How was that?
Well, it looked like they were shot. It's hard to tell because there was a lot of clothes on top of them.
Clothes on top of them?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Were they robbed? Or?
I don't think so.
It just looks like somebody just came in and shot them.
Yeah, it looks like somebody knew him, whoever did it.
Well, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody that they know.
No.
Could have been anybody.
This was a man who supposedly had just found out that his mother and his two brothers had been murdered. And the fact that he was very kind of nonchalant, he was not emotional whatsoever. He did not cry, he did not seem surprised, he really didn't seem concerned.
And because Hartung was the last person known to see his family alive, he was then asked the big question.
So something didn't happen when you were over there Tuesday night and you killed him?
No. Nothing happened.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Because if something happened, now's the time to tell me.
I would not kill my mother and my brothers.
Okay.
I mean, why would I do something like that?
I don't know. I don't know you.
Well, I understand that. I know that's true. But I wouldn't do something like that. I'd never harm my family.
He was also asked if they could search his home, which again was approximately 3 miles away from where the Smith family lived. He did consent to a search of his home. He did seem cooperative.
And that led to a surprising discovery. Donald Hartung was a practicing member of the Wicca religion, a believer in magic and witchcraft.
Who knows, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, obviously, that was a way for him to justify in his own mind, as to what he was doing.
But that was no surprise to Hartung's family members, who said Hartung's mother, a good Christian lady, had been outraged about Donald's Wiccan beliefs.
And she did not agree with her son doing the Wiccan, and she knew he was doing the Wiccan. It's witchcraft to her. It's devil worship. That's the way my aunt thought about it. And she didn't want her other two sons around him. She was very against it.
That didn't square with what Hartung had told Detective Infinger about his relationship with his mother.
She's all I got.
She was the one that was always there for you.
That's right. She's always there for me.
Hmm.
She was always there for me. There ain't nothing in this world I could ask my mother for that she wouldn't give me.
Really?
That's right. Nothing.
But when I spoke with neighbors, other people that knew the victims of the family, it was different than what Donald had told me. The relationships weren't as close as Donald had portrayed the relationships to be. They were more distant. There wasn't a lot of communication within the family. Donald only came over on Tuesdays to cook, and that was about it.
So, well after midnight on the day the bodies were discovered, at about 1:30 in the morning, Donald Hartung was brought back to the sheriff's office.
When something like this happens, you are working 24/7 till you hit a dead end.
All leads pointed to Hartung as the murderer.
And killed your mom?
I did not kill my mother.
And then killed your brother?
I would never kill my mom or my brother. Either one of my brothers. I mean, do I look like some kind of a blooming maniac to you people?
I mean, you
to me.
Could the detective get a confession out of this late-night interrogation? Was the blue moon going to be the key to solving the murders? In the first 24 hours of the investigation, the working theory was that a rare blue moon had led Donald Hartung to kill his family as part of a ritualistic sacrifice connected to the Wiccan religion. That was the theory.
I don't know anything about Wiccan sacrifices. I don't know a thing about anything like that.
And Detective Matt Infiger pounded away on that theory during a post-midnight interrogation of Hartung, who had acknowledged he was a follower of Wicca.
Who knows that you're Wiccan?
Nobody. I'm a solitary practitioner. Nobody knows that I'm a Wiccan.
If you know about the blue moon and all that kind of stuff, you do.
Well, I know about the blue moon. I know it's two full moons, but I mean, it's been all over the radio.
Like I was explaining to you about the Wiccan ritual, they cover them to keep them warm after they kill them.
I don't know nothing about no ritual like that.
I mean, who does that?
A crazy person does that.
Only later would Detective Infiger learn that the theory of a blue moon ritual sacrifice was completely at odds with the Wiccan faith.
That is just insanity. There is no such thing as human sacrifice in the religion of Wicca. None. Zero. Zilch.
Susie Smith calls herself a high priestess of the Wiccan religion and is proud to be known as a witch.
I am a witch. I am a witch and I am Wiccan.
She was so upset about what Sheriff Morgan said that she sent him this video demanding he retract his statements.
And for Sheriff Morgan to attach the Wiccan religion to this murder was presumptuous, and he should have checked his facts before he made such accusatory statements. As a high priestess of the community, I have the right to say, yes, you are Wiccan, no, you're not. I want them to know that this man has nothing to do with our community.
But that was well after the sheriff had already made headlines around the world with his blue moon Wiccan theory.
It's witchcraft. I'll say that right now.
The sheriff's information was based, apparently, on a deputy's quick reading of a since-debunked website that deals in witchcraft and conspiracies.
It had no basis in fact, and it was just baffling that the sheriff went off on that tangent. You have to look at the sheriff's theory in the perspective of the day he made his announcement that Donald was a suspect and that it was a Wiccan witchcraft type murder was also when he had his first fundraiser for his re-election campaign. The sheriff made lots of headlines. got a lot of publicity, and effectively helped his campaign considerably.
But for the homicide case, the Blue Moon theory was a rabbit hole that did nothing to further the investigation.
I got calls from all over the United States about it, and I was having to deal with trying to investigate a murder and deal with all this Wicca stuff.
And after pumping Donald Hartung over and over in the early morning hours about his Wiccan belief, Detective Infiger got nowhere, despite repeatedly calling him a killer.
Nobody has seen these people since Tuesday, since you saw them.
I was the last one to see him alive.
Yeah. So how are you going to sit there and tell us that you didn't kill them when you were the last one to see them? They trusted you, and you killed them. They didn't think anything of it. They didn't know it was coming.
I love my parents.
I'm sure you did.
I
but
love
you
my
killed
mom
them.
and my brothers, and I did not kill them. I did not kill them. I would never harm my mother, never hurt my brothers, never.
I never thought Donald was going to confess to the murder when I was interviewing him. He was a little, I'm not going to say arrogant, but he had a confidence about himself that he thought he could outsmart us.
With no confession and no physical evidence or even video surveillance footage to implicate him, Donald Hartung was allowed to go home, to the horror of his relatives who had come for the funeral.
He never cried a tear. He never shed a tear at the funeral, never at the graveside. He scared us because we had went by his house one time and he was standing there. We were sitting at the table and he reached up on top of his refrigerator. He was standing there. He said, "Well, if I'm a murderer and they're so smart, why didn't they find this?" And he slammed a machete on the table where we were sitting.
Now the investigation would depend on the forensics, any fingerprints or DNA found at the scene, a real challenge in this investigation.
It's difficult to make a case when there is a family member involved simply because we knew that Donald Hartung went to the family home on every Tuesday to cook dinner. So the fact that his DNA is going to be there is, a given. But what happened in this case is that his DNA turned up on places where it absolutely should not have been.
On the zipper of his brother Richard's notebook case and on Richard's checkbook. And now that interrogation conducted by Detective Infiger really paid off, as Hartung was asked if he had ever touched any of Richard or RT's belongings.
Well, I mean, if it's in the house, I didn't touch it.
Okay.
Or no matter where it was, I didn't touch it. I mean, I don't mess with nothing of RT's.
That definitely jumped out to us, and we had Donald Hartung's DNA on the inside of Richard's belt. And obviously that was a place that his DNA should not have been, because he told law enforcement that he had not seen Richard in either 2 to 3 weeks.
So you said you'd never touched anything of RT's before?
Not Tuesday. RT wasn't there.
But the clincher may have been what was found in the trash can on top of some bloody towels.
And then on top of that was a cigarette butt that had Donald Hartung's DNA. So whoever put that cigarette butt in the trash can or smoked that cigarette butt and placed it on top of the items of cleanup was certainly in the home, at least at the time of the homicides and the time of the cleanups.
That kind of sealed the deal in my mind that Donald was the one who did this.
It took 3 months of work, but the time had come to arrest Donald Hartung for the murder of his family, just a few days before Halloween.
An arrest has been made in a 3-month-old triple murder in Pensacola.
Police say 58-year-old Donald Hartung Jr. murdered his mother and 2 half-brothers using a claw hammer.
And I just broke down and started crying, and I said, "Thank you, Lord, thank you, thank you." It was the hardest 3 months I've ever lived, waiting on him to get arrested.
But it would take another 4 years before the case went to trial, and in that time, Hartung's lawyer, Michael Griffith, would uncover evidence that the investigation had its own serious flaws. Flaws that Griffith was prepared to fully exploit in his courtly Southern way.
You certainly have to be aggressive, but you don't have to be a rude horse's ass. This isn't a Jerry Springer show.
Jury selection's begun in a triple murder case linked to witchcraft.
The triple murder made headlines when police believed it was a ritualistic set of killings tied to witchcraft and the appearance of a rarely seen blue moon.
State of Florida plaintiff versus Donald Wayne Hartung, defendant.
But for all the media talk and the headlines about the so-called Blue Moon ritual murders, the prosecution would not make any mention of that in the opening statement.
When we got the case at the state attorney's office, we didn't believe the evidence showed that this was related to Wiccan or sacrifice.
And I knew they weren't going down that rabbit hole. They were too good of lawyers to go down that rabbit hole.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back.
But lead prosecutor Bridget Jensen knew she had to provide the jury with a motive for Donald Hartung in her opening statement.
There will be no question that this defendant is the person who murdered his family. And here is why. Last will and testament of Von Sill Smith, he was excluded. So to be included, all three of them had to die.
Members of the jury, I heard Ms. Jensen's opening statement and it was masterful, but it leaves out many of the facts or the lack of facts that you are going to hear. The biggest problem is juries want to believe the police are right. They want to believe the prosecutors all wear white hats and they wouldn't prosecute a case against an innocent person.
And defense lawyer Michael Griffith was prepared to challenge significant holes in the state's case.
There is no indication of any physical evidence that he committed any of the murders. There was no gun found. There was no blood found at his house. There was nothing to link him in any way to these murders besides his DNA at his mom's house, where he went at least every Tuesday to cook dinner for them. Now, as far as the will is concerned, what the will says that Donald Hartung Jr. is excluded. My client is Donald Hartung Sr. Is that an error in drafting the will, or was it meant to exclude Mr. Hartung's son, Donald Hartung Jr.?
For prosecutors, the 4 years that Donald Hartung awaited trial in the Escambia County Jail gave them a crucial advantage.
Will you state your full name, please?
Marlon Devon Purifoy.
A jailhouse informant who had been housed with Hartung.
Mr. Purifoy had information that he could not have gotten without having conversations with Mr. Hartung.
Now, did there come a time when Mr. Hartung talked about the murder of his family?
Yeah, he told me.
Okay. And did he tell you who killed his mother and two brothers?
He said he killed them.
Did he tell you why?
He said he wanted the money because she left him out the will.
Now, did he tell you if the murders was it just something that kind of happened, or was it something he'd been thinking about?
Well, he said he'd been playing it last 3 to 4 years. He said Ouija board made him go overboard, though.
The what? I'm sorry?
A Ouija board.
What about a Ouija board?
He said that really made him do it, made him go overboard.
This is the Ouija board investigators discovered at the home of Donald Hartung, along with other books and symbols of witchcraft.
According to Mr. Purifoy, a lot of other inmates were actually scared of Mr. Hartung.
Why?
They thought he was a witch.
And then Purifoy testified about what Hartung claimed to have done to his mother, Von Sill.
He went to his mother, and then he tortured her so she can tell the combination for the safes and stuff.
He said he tortured her, I'm sorry?
He tortured her.
How?
He cut her left pinky finger so he can tell the combination for the safes and stuff.
Investigators found the safe at the home had been successfully opened.
I knew that the pinky finger was cut. I didn't know how it happened or why. And then when Purifoy stated that Donald had done that torturing his mother, it made sense.
On cross-examination, Purifoy held his own, questioned by Griffith's co-counsel.
Mr. Purifoy, you've been convicted of felony, as you said, 6 or 7 times?
Yes, ma'am.
And a conviction for a crime of dishonesty?
Yes, ma'am.
Juries still tend to put credibility in what these jailhouse snitches say. And I think the reason is juries don't understand that these convicts are con men. They can sell ice water to Eskimos, a lot of them.
It was about the money, because he always liked to brag. Like he's gonna go to Miami and stuff, hang out with some girls and stuff.
And you testified earlier that Mr. Hartung was angry because his mother had written Mr. Hartung's son out of the will.
No, written both of them out of the will, him and his son.
Now the defense took over, focused on undercutting the handling of the crime scene forensics.
I think it was a very sloppy investigation for a murder case.
The defense brought out that the lead crime scene technician who collected the DNA, Christine Rollins, had since been fired and was being prosecuted for stealing drugs from the evidence room.
So with the 24 felony counts you were charged with, you were facing potentially 170 years in prison, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, what happens when the hammer hits?
And the state's medical examiner had since resigned after allegations she had misused state money.
We've got a medical examiner playing funny with money. She quits her job because of it. We've got a crime scene tech who stole drugs from the evidence room and got in trouble herself. The jury has to believe these people. Who do you believe?
No one. I believe no one.
All leading to a challenge of the time of death, the day when the prosecution said the victims had been killed. The bodies were discovered on a Friday, July 31st. But the investigators concluded the murders had taken place 3 days earlier, on Tuesday the 28th, the day Hartung was seen by a neighbor arriving at the home and leaving later than usual.
Early afternoon, I saw Mr. Hartung arrive, and then later on I saw RT come home, and then I saw Mr. Hartung leave.
Now, was it normal or abnormal to see RT come home while Hartung was still at the house?
It was not usual. Usually Mr. Hartung was gone before RT came home.
And RT's, Richard Smith's, body was found wearing the same clothes seen on him in this surveillance video when he left work that Tuesday, adding to the evidence he was killed that Tuesday night. But a defense medical expert,
I'm Dr. Jonathan Arden,
called that into serious question, saying the victims could not have been killed on Tuesday the 28th, as the prosecutors said. Based on their body heat and rigor mortis level when they were discovered, the doctor said they were killed no sooner than Wednesday the 29th.
Late on the 29th?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is scientific, correct?
Yes, it is based on science.
There's no way that those people were murdered any time earlier than Wednesday. So all of the scientific evidence was with the defense. It couldn't have been Donald, so that's why the time of death was so important in this case.
And even the prosecutors acknowledged that Dr. Arden's testimony was a serious challenge to their case.
He's amazing, he's intelligent, he's been doing this for a long time. And when you look at the scientific factors, it certainly looked like the murders were committed after Tuesday.
If the jury accepted the science that the murders were committed at least a day after Donald Hartung left the house, that would be more than enough for a reasonable doubt and a verdict of not guilty.
All right, members of the jury, both the state and defense have now rested their case. The attorneys now will present their final arguments.
Ladies and gentlemen.
The difficult part of the case is that it was, 98% circumstantial. Jurors want forensics. They want eyewitnesses. We didn't have any of that.
The best the prosecution had was this surveillance video of Richard Hartung at work on that Tuesday evening.
He is wearing the exact same thing when his body is found on Friday the 31st. What does that tell you? He was murdered right when he got home from work.
And while the prosecution had dismissed the Blue Moon murder theory as a motive, Jensen did address the informant's testimony about Hartung and the occult.
Mr. Purefoy told you that this defendant said that although he had been planning it for this number of years, the Ouija board is what made the defendant do it.
The Ouija board made him go overboard, though.
The what? I'm sorry?
A Ouija board.
People were scared of him. They thought he was a witch.
In the end, the prosecution's strongest evidence was the discovery of Hartung's DNA on his brother's checkbook, his belt, and those telltale cigarette butts, including the one in the trash.
Why so much focus on the cigarette butt in the trash? Because it's bad for them. It is beyond a reasonable doubt bad for them. And the whole point is this: it shouldn't be there. It is smack dab in the middle of cleanup of cooking and murder.
But throughout the trial, family members said Hartung seemed unfazed about the evidence against him.
Several times he would turn around and look at us. Several times he would turn around and smile, like a smirk, like I'm gonna get out of this.
May it please the court, members of the prosecution, members of the jury.
You need to know your juries. You can't come across as some hotshot TV lawyer.
But Michael Griffith did not hesitate to call into question the tactics used against his client in those 2 interrogations by Detective Matt Infinger.
Well, I promise you this, I'm going to find out.
I know
and
you will,
if you
sir.
did it, I'm going to find out and I'm going to put your ass in jail.
He was brutal to Mr. Hartung, trying to break him down after learning that his family had been murdered.
And Griffith questioned why the prosecution even played the clip showing Hartung being questioned about the later debunked Blue Moon Wiccan theory.
I was explaining to you about the Wiccan ritual. They cover them to keep them warm after they kill them.
I don't know nothing about no ritual like that.
If the state wasn't relying on this Wiccan killing theory, why did they show it to you? Why did they introduce it? They didn't have to introduce it. I suggest to you they put it in to try to offend you, get you upset.
I'm going to object. There's absolutely no evidence of that.
Approach, counsel. Members of the jury, you're to disregard any prior reference to the state's motivation.
And then the biggest hurdle for the defense, the DNA evidence.
Could Richard have left his checkbook at home on the dining table and Donald moved it one day and gotten his DNA all over it? Sure he could have. The fact that his DNA is on that checkbook doesn't mean that he's a killer.
As the jurors left to begin their deliberations, some of them gave Hartung a close look, and he seemed to have returned the looks too.
And he was smiling at them. He's creeping the jury out. They were scared. The women were looking at him like, what is wrong with him? You know, why is he smiling at us?
The jury was out for 4 hours.
All right, members of the jury, it's my understanding you've reached a verdict. Have you reached a verdict?
In the circuit court in and for Escambia County, Florida, State of Florida plaintiff versus Donald Wayne Hartung, defendant. We, the jury, find the defendant, Donald Hartung, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
When they said guilty, I was just crying, just holding my head down. Finally, it took 4.5 years to get here. So long.
Donald Hartung showed no emotion, but the smile was gone.
Very disappointed. Stoic as he is, but very, very disappointed.
And now, the state moved to impose the death penalty on Hartung on a day that would provide no shortage of surprises as Hartung jumped up to speak.
Your Honor, I would like to respectfully ask for a mistrial.
Hartung then turned on his own lawyers in an hour-long rant, saying his lawyers were incompetent and one had disrespected him when he asked her a question.
Mrs. Wilson replied, after I asked her opinion, she said, "You're a stupid asshole." I said, "What? What did you say?" And Mrs. Wilson said, I said, you're a stupid asshole.
He wanted his lawyers fired.
I'm a $10-hour security guard, Your Honor. I couldn't possibly be expected to go up against 4 seasoned attorneys. I was duped and I was tricked, and I'm willing to admit it, and so were you.
But Judge Dan Heiser rejected Hartung's argument. And so now the jury was asked to decide whether Donald Hartung should be put to death in a Florida state prison for the murders he was found guilty of committing.
All right, Madam Forewoman, my understanding you reached a verdict, is that correct?
We have, Your Honor.
And then the second surprise of the day. Had the state proved Donald Hartung should be put to death for each victim?
As to count 1, Fonzie Hill Smith, no. As to count 2, John Smith, no. As to the count 3, Richard Smith, no.
A major victory for the defense. Prosecutors could only speculate that Hartung's aged, unhealthy appearance may have swayed some of the jurors.
And maybe some of them would have thought that maybe it was just a lost cause, that, he's probably going to die in prison, in a short amount of time, and so what use is the death penalty at that point?
The lawyers he wanted fired had kept him off death row.
You don't know what juries say, what they think. We may have raised enough issues on the scientific evidence that the jury, although they found him guilty, had enough doubt that they weren't going to execute.
But members of Hartung's family in the courtroom said they could tell he was hardly celebrating.
He's miserable. He deserves to be miserable. When it first happened, I hated him. I wanted him to suffer. I had to work through forgiveness to forgive him. And I do forgive him, but I will never forget what he did.
So if you put something out good, expect good. If you put something out bad, expect bad. That's how it works.
Evil. Just pure evil.